Hour here on Michael Cohen Sports Talk Nation. And, well, the Mets are back in the news as the offseason is now rolling. The World Series has come and it is gone. Let me take these off. World Series has come and gone. The Texas Rangers, of course, World Series champions. But this has all been about trying to find out who would be the next manager of the New York Mets. And this did not go the way anybody had expected or had planned. Ever since Buck Showalter got fired by this team, and it was a firing that I did not like. I know a lot of Met fans didn't like it. I thought Buck Showalter should have gotten another year. Granted, yes, he did have a bad year in the dugout, but considering that just a year ago, this was a man who was the manager of the year in the National League for a team that won 101 games. Had a bad year this past year, I understand that. But the Mets decided to move on. If you are the Mets, you bring in David Stearns. And the thought process being that he is going to bring in his guys, that there was a plan in place. I think a lot of Met fans had this impression. There was a plan in place where you would see not just David Stearns come in here with the Mets, but you would see possibly Craig Counsell, his buddy from all those years in Milwaukee, following him to Flushing, Queens, to take over as the manager of the Mets. And yes, the Mets did interview Craig Counsell. Yes, the Mets did everything they could to try to get Craig Counsell here. At the end of the day, Craig Counsell is not the manager of the New York Mets. Because Craig Counsell got exactly what he wanted. 1, he used the Mets as leverage. 2, he got a chance to manage a team close to his home in Milwaukee, spurn the Milwaukee Brewers, and instead stays in the NL Central, going to the Chicago Cubs in a deal that nobody saw coming in the last minute here, as he gets $8 million a year to manage the Cubs. The Cubs oust their current manager, who I'm sure probably just found out today that he was going, or if not even yesterday, that he was on the way out. Who knows? In David Ross. And I'll be honest with you, I don't like the way this all went down. First of all, the Cubs did David Ross dirty. Let's just be honest here. There was no indication that the Cubs' job was going to be open at all this offseason. There are a number of jobs that were open. The Mets' job was open. The Brewers' job was open. We knew that the Angels' job was open. The Giants' job was open for a brief moment when Bob Melvin swung in and took that job away. The Padres' job is now open. The Astros' job, of course, is open, with Dusty Baker resigning. Nobody knew the Chicago Cubs were going to be part of the equation. But here is Craig Counsell. Here are the Chicago Cubs pulling a fast one on David Ross. I don't like that move at all. That's a bad look for everybody as far as I'm concerned. That's really, really, really dirty and disgusting. Now, here's the thing that just burns me up. Burns me up in this whole thing. Not just the fact, I know I just went from 0 to 60 just in a few seconds there, but not just the fact that this was a dirty play by the Cubs and Craig Counsell, but the Mets got played. Steve Cohen got played. David Stearns got played. And we were all under the assumption that this was going to be the plan. They're going to bring in Craig Counsell. Now, it was a risky gamble because the thought was, well, if he doesn't go to the Mets, he may just stay with the Milwaukee Brewers for understandable reasons. He wants to stay close to family, friends, not a New York guy. Totally understand that. That's his prerogative. But he used the Mets as leverage to get that more money, get $8 million out of Chicago a year and set a new trend, a new market for managers. Mets got played. And this is unfortunately, since Steve Cohen has been the manager, unfortunately, look, I've given Steve Cohen a lot of credit because, yes, he has changed the culture of the team, brought in some number of big-name free agents. You can't complain about that. Obviously, it didn't work out at the end of the day with guys like Verlander and Scherzer. Totally understand that. He has certainly done much more to recognize the history and tradition of this franchise better than the Wilpons ever did. Not going to take anything away from him in that regard, but there are times in off seasons where he has gotten used as leverage. Look at the Carlos Correa situation just last year, and the mess that turned into. Of course, Correa kept failing physicals with the Giants, and then with the Mets, and then eventually goes back to the Twins for less money. Then, of course, before that, the year before that was and I know this very sensitive topic, of course, with Trevor Bauer. But yes, even the Mets had potentially outbid the Dodgers, but in a lot of ways, thankfully, he decided to go to the Dodgers. We all know what a mess that turned into for the Dodgers. So, in many ways, while he has gotten played at times, Mets have, up to this point, pretty much avoided the bullet. This time, it hurts them because the whole plan was going to be you replace a 100-win manager, a guy who's had playoff experience, with another manager who has playoff experience. And that's not the case now. But the names we heard other than Craig Counsell were obviously the new manager of the Mets here, Carlos Mendoza, and Mark Kotsay. Mark Kotsay of the Oakland A's. And they pushed Kotsay to the side, and then it sounded like it was either going to be Mendoza or Counsell. And at the end of the day, Craig Counsell says, I'm going to go get more money and stay in the Midwest and go to Chicago, do David Ross dirty, and we move on from there. I don't know what manager Carlos Mendoza is going to be. I have no idea. He may be the nicest guy in the world. He might be a great manager. We don't know. He deserves the opportunity at least to find out. But it still harkens back to what the Mets, and the reason why Met fans are not optimistic and they're not excited right now at this moment is because it feels a lot like some of the things the Mets did before they brought in Buck Showalter just a couple of years ago. Hiring guys like Luis Rojas. Good guy, but just couldn't handle him, just wasn't a great manager in game situations. Mickey Callaway, well, the off-field scandals notwithstanding, his inability to handle the New York media, inability to manage in New York. Well, that's really one reason why the Mets went out and got a Buck Showalter, was to have that guy who's been there, done that, who's won, who's been successful, and now he's gone. That's why in a lot of ways it feels like the Mets just played themselves. It really does. Because they had the perfect manager right there in Buck Showalter, and they let him walk. That was a big mistake. I hope I'm wrong about Carlos Mendoza. I hope he turns into a great manager. I hope he turns into the next Davey Johnson, where we're sitting here in a few years and say, remember that time when you said Carlos Mendoza was not going to, you weren't too excited about Carlos Mendoza? Well, here are all the rings. I hope we have that conversation one day. I really do. But I have to sit there and wonder, what's the plan now for the Mets? Are they going to, because the conversation in the offseason has been, and even ever since the Verlander and Scherzer trades in the summer, has been, we're going to compete. We're not going to tank in 2024, quote unquote tank. We're going to compete this year. Well, are they? Or are they now going to shift to rebuild now? With a first-year manager, they're kind of scrambling around trying to find assistant coaches and bench for the bench coach position now with the Mets. I hear you've seen Phil Nevin's name mentioned out there. Nevin, who was the manager of the Angels before he got tossed to the side. They're looking for a new skipper now to replace him. Gabe Kapler, who was not a good manager in Philadelphia or San Francisco. His name's getting tossed out there as a potential bench coach here for the Mets. So it feels like they're kind of scrambling right now to try to figure out how to put this coaching staff together. This is the day and age we live in, folks. I get it. This is the day and age in baseball we live in. Managers don't have a lot of control anymore. They're more like figureheads. These general managers and directors of player personnel have more of control than ever before. I get that. I totally get it. But I say that in full knowledge that the last two managers to win a World Series, Bruce Bochy this year with the Texas Rangers, old school manager, last year, Dusty Baker in Houston, old school manager. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else to say. What is the plan moving forward for the Mets? That's the question now. And it's now on Stearns, it's now on Cohen to try to figure that out. What pieces are they going to put under Carlos Mendoza to give him a chance to succeed in his first year as a major league manager? Young guy, 43 years old, who has been with the Yankees system for a long time, been there since 2009, I believe, has managed a couple of years in the minors at the Gulf Coast League and Charleston River Dogs. So basically just single A, low A and then single A. That's it. Was the Yankees bench coach the last 4 years for Aaron Boone, and we all know how unpopular Aaron Boone is right now in New York. The word on the street is that Mendoza's a good baseball guy, knows his stuff. And he probably does. And we'll see how that all plays out. He's going to get the opportunity, as I said. But I just feel that the Mets put themselves in a very bad position as far as this search was concerned, when a search that they didn't need to make. A search they didn't need to make because they had the right guy the entire time. And that's what has to drive me and many other Met fans crazy. I know it was a down year for Buck Showalter this past year, but they had the right guy in place. Prove me wrong, folks. I'm asking Mets, please prove me wrong. Leave your thoughts below. Talk to you next time.